Welcome to Lesson 10 of Week 9. Thus far, we have focused on developing and presenting budgets for proposals. But budgets are not static. Once a grant is awarded, circumstances change, staff leave and are replaced at different salaries, equipment prices shift, travel plans evolve, activities take longer or cost differently than expected. Understanding how to manage budget changes during grant implementation is essential for successful project management. Federal regulations establish when you can make changes independently and when you need prior approval. This lesson will help you understand the regulatory framework for budget revisions, which changes require prior approval versus internal authority, how to request and document budget modifications, and what contingency planning is appropriate at proposal stage. The primary reference is 2 CFR 200.308, which establishes requirements for changes to federal awards. Review this regulation and verify current text at ecfr.gov. By the end of this lesson, you will understand how to manage the inevitable budget changes that occur during grant implementation while remaining compliant with federal requirements. Understanding why budgets change helps you anticipate and manage modifications appropriately. Budget changes are normal and expected in multi-year projects. Personnel turnover affects most multi-year grants. Staff leave for other opportunities, retire, or change roles. Replacements may be hired at different salary levels. Effort levels may need adjustment when responsibilities shift. Personnel changes are among the most common triggers for budget modification. Activity evolution occurs because implementation realities differ from proposal assumptions. What seemed like the right approach during proposal development may need adjustment based on actual experience. Participant recruitment may be faster or slower. Data collection may require different resources. Activities evolve, and budgets should support actual work. Price changes mean actual costs differ from estimates. Equipment prices may increase or decrease. Travel costs fluctuate with market conditions. Supplies may cost more or less than projected. Multi-year projects face particular uncertainty about future prices. Opportunity or challenge emerges from unforeseen circumstances requiring response. A new partnership opportunity may require redirecting resources. A data collection challenge may require additional investment. Circumstances you could not anticipate at proposal stage may require budget adjustment to address effectively. The regulatory framework for budget revisions establishes what you can and cannot change independently. Understanding this framework ensures compliant budget management. 2 CFR 200.308 governs revision of budget and program plans. This regulation identifies specific changes requiring prior written approval from the federal sponsor and establishes the framework for managing modifications during the award period. Prior approval is required for some changes before implementation. The regulation lists specific actions that require federal agency approval. Making these changes without prior approval violates grant terms even if the changes themselves would be reasonable. Knowing what requires approval prevents compliance problems. Internal authority allows some changes to be made without prior approval. Within certain thresholds and categories, you can adjust your budget to reflect actual needs without seeking federal permission. This flexibility enables responsive management without bureaucratic delay. Award terms may add restrictions beyond the standard regulatory requirements. Some programs or agencies have additional prior approval requirements. Your specific terms and conditions may require approval for changes that would otherwise be within your authority. Always check your award terms for program-specific requirements. Certain changes require prior approval from your federal sponsor. Understanding these requirements prevents compliance violations. Scope changes that modify project objectives or scope require prior approval. Changing what you propose to accomplish, adding or eliminating objectives, or significantly altering your approach requires agency agreement. The agency funded a specific project. Fundamental changes require their approval. Key personnel changes, including principal investigator or project director, typically require prior approval. These individuals were named in your proposal as essential to project success. Replacing them requires agency confirmation that the change is acceptable and that appropriate individuals will lead the project. Budget transfers exceeding threshold amounts require prior approval. The standard threshold is often cumulative transfers exceeding 10% of the total approved budget. Moving funds between categories is fine up to this point. Beyond it, you need approval. Some agencies have different thresholds or additional restrictions. 2 CFR 200.308 paragraphs C and D list prior approval requirements. The regulation specifies changes requiring approval and establishes the prior approval process. Review this regulation carefully and apply it to your specific circumstances. Additional categories of changes require prior approval. Knowing the full list ensures you seek approval when needed. No cost extension to extend your project period without additional funds typically requires prior approval. If you need more time to complete project work but do not need additional funding, you must request an extension before your current end date. Some agencies have one-time extension authority for certain situations. Cost transfers to subawards may require prior approval depending on amount. Significantly increasing subaward budgets, adding new subawards, or making transfers that cross thresholds require prior approval. The treatment of subaward modifications varies by agency and program. Pre-award costs are expenses incurred before your award start date that you want to charge to the grant. Generally, up to 90 days of pre-award costs may be allowable at recipient risk without prior approval, but some programs restrict pre-award spending. Check your award terms for specific guidance. Equipment acquisition not in approved budget may require prior approval. Adding significant equipment purchases that were not included in your original budget may need agency approval. The specific threshold and requirements vary by agency and program. Equipment changes are treated more carefully than supply purchases. Many budget changes fall within your authority to make without prior approval. Understanding this flexibility enables responsive management. Minor rebudgeting includes transfers between budget categories that remain within approval thresholds. If cumulative transfers stay under 10% of total budget or whatever threshold applies to your award, you can move funds as needed. This flexibility lets you respond to actual costs and needs without seeking permission for every adjustment. Staff replacements for non-key personnel generally do not require prior approval. When staff members who are not named as key personnel leave and are replaced, you can make these changes within normal hiring processes. The replacement should have appropriate qualifications, but agency approval of specific individuals is not required. Vendor changes, including selecting different contractors or suppliers, are within your authority. If you obtained quotes from a specific vendor during proposal but find a better option during implementation, you can choose differently. Procurement should still follow proper procedures, but you are not locked into proposal stage vendor assumptions. Implementation details about how activities are carried out can be adjusted within project scope. If your proposal described one approach but a variation would work better, you have flexibility to adjust methods while maintaining objectives. The key is that objectives remain unchanged even as implementation details evolve. When prior approval is required, following proper procedures ensures your request is processed appropriately. Understanding the request process helps you obtain timely approvals. Written request submission to your program officer is standard practice. Email is typically acceptable, but some agencies may have specific submission requirements or forms. Address your request to the appropriate agency contact and include your award number and project information. Justification explains why the change is needed. Do not simply request approval. Explain the circumstances driving the change. What happened that makes this modification necessary? How does the change improve your ability to achieve project objectives? Program officers need context to evaluate requests appropriately. Budget impact shows how the change affects your budget. If you are requesting a budget transfer, show where funds are coming from and where they are going. If you are adding equipment, show how it fits within your total budget. Quantified impact helps program officers understand what you are requesting. Timing requires requesting before making the change, not after. Prior approval means approval before you act. Making changes first and seeking approval afterward violates the requirement, even if approval would have been granted. Build lead time into your planning for changes requiring approval. Proper documentation of budget changes protects you during audits and demonstrates responsible management. Building good documentation habits prevents problems. Internal records should document all budget modifications regardless of approval requirements. When you move funds between categories, note the transfer, amount, reason, and date. When circumstances change, document what changed and how you responded. Complete records enable you to explain budget evolution if questioned. Approval evidence for changes requiring prior approval should be retained. Keep copies of approval requests and agency responses. Written approval should be in your files before you implement the change. If approval was verbal, follow up in writing to confirm and create a record. Cumulative tracking monitors transfers against prior approval thresholds. If your threshold is 10% of total budget, track cumulative transfers so you know when you are approaching the limit. Discovering you exceeded the threshold after the fact creates compliance problems that tracking could have prevented. Audit trail documentation should support examination during audits or reviews. Auditors may examine budget modifications to verify compliance with prior approval requirements. Documentation showing what changes occurred, why, and whether appropriate approvals were obtained demonstrates responsible management. Carryover of funds between budget periods is related to but distinct from budget revisions. Understanding carryover helps you manage multi-year budgets effectively. Carryover is defined as unspent funds from one budget period becoming available in the next period. If you do not spend all of year one funding by year one end, carryover determines whether those funds remain available in year two or are lost. Automatic versus approval required carryover varies by award. Some federal awards allow automatic carryover of unobligated balances without prior approval. Others require approval to carry funds forward. Your award terms specify which treatment applies. Know your carryover rules before year end. Rebudgeting of carried funds may have restrictions. Even if carryover is automatic, using those funds may have limitations. Some programs require that carried funds support the same activities originally planned. Others allow more flexibility in using carryover amounts. Agency policies on carryover vary by funder and program. NIH has specific carryover rules. NSF has different policies. Other agencies have their own approaches. Beyond general regulations, understand your specific funder's practices regarding year-end balances and carryover. Contingency planning at proposal stage helps you prepare for uncertainty while complying with restrictions on contingency reserves. Understanding appropriate approaches enables realistic budgeting. No contingency line is allowed because federal budgets generally cannot include explicit reserves for unforeseen events. You cannot add a line item for contingency or management reserve. Each budget item should represent actual expected cost, not padded amounts to create cushion. Conservative estimates build cushion legitimately through realistic cost projections. When cost is uncertain, estimating toward the higher end of a reasonable range provides some protection against overruns. This is not padding, it is acknowledging uncertainty in a defensible way. Conservative but realistic estimates create implicit flexibility. Flexibility planning designs budgets with some inherent ability to adjust. Personnel budgets with slight excess allow absorption of unexpected costs. Supply estimates based on maximum expected usage provide cushion if needs are lower. Budget design can create flexibility without explicit contingency. Risk awareness identifies areas where costs are most uncertain. Travel costs may be volatile. Technology prices change rapidly. Some activities have more cost uncertainty than others. Being aware of high uncertainty areas helps you plan for possible need for budget revision during implementation. Your program officer is a resource for navigating budget changes. Building a constructive relationship facilitates effective communication when changes arise. Early communication about potential changes is valuable. When you see circumstances that may require budget modification, reach out to your program officer early. Early discussion can clarify whether approval is needed and shape your approach to requesting it. Informal guidance from program officers before formal requests helps you understand requirements. A phone call or email asking whether a contemplated change requires prior approval can save time. Program officers can also advise on how to frame requests for best chance of approval. Relationship building through regular communication creates mutual understanding. Program officers who know your project and trust your management are better positioned to respond helpfully to budget issues. Do not contact your program officer only when you need something. Problem-solving support is available because program officers can help navigate complex situations. When unusual circumstances arise or you are unsure how to proceed, your program officer can offer guidance. They want your project to succeed and can be valuable allies in addressing challenges. Budget revisions typically involve multiple institutional offices. Understanding roles helps you work effectively within your organization. Sponsored Programs Office often reviews and submits prior approval requests to federal sponsors. They have experience with these processes and ensure requests are properly formatted and complete. Work with your sponsored program staff when seeking prior approvals. Finance Office tracks budget expenditures and modifications. They maintain records of how funds are spent and can report on cumulative transfers against thresholds. Finance provides the data you need to identify when budget revisions are necessary and monitor compliance. Principal investigators identify the need for changes and provide justification. As project leader, you understand why modifications are needed and can explain the circumstances. Your substantive justification is essential for approval requests. You know your project best. Compliance support ensures modifications follow requirements. Your organization may have grants compliance staff who review proposed changes for regulatory issues. Their review catches potential problems before they occur and protects both you and the institution. Common mistakes in budget revision management create compliance problems. Recognizing these errors helps you avoid them. Acting before approval means making changes that require prior approval without obtaining permission first. This violates grant terms even if the change itself would have been approved. Prior approval means approval before action, not ratification afterward. Poor documentation fails to create records of changes and their justifications. When modifications occur without documentation, you cannot demonstrate compliance during audits. Even changes within your authority should be documented to show responsible management. Ignoring thresholds means not tracking cumulative transfers against prior approval limits. Many projects make multiple small transfers that individually require no approval. Without tracking, cumulative transfers may exceed thresholds without anyone realizing it until audit. Late requests seek approval after changes are needed rather than when they are anticipated. If you know in September that you will need to make a significant rebudgeting in December, request approval in September. Waiting until December when you need immediate action puts pressure on a process that takes time. Following best practices for budget revision management ensures compliant, effective financial management. These practices should guide your approach throughout the project. Know your requirements by understanding what requires approval for your specific award. The standard regulations provide the baseline, but your award terms may have additional requirements. Read your terms and conditions carefully and ask questions if anything is unclear. Monitor proactively by tracking spending and transfers throughout the project. Do not wait for year-end to discover budget issues. Regular monitoring identifies trends early, gives you time to respond, and prevents surprises. Proactive monitoring is essential for effective budget management. Communicate early by discussing potential changes with your program officer before they become urgent. Early communication builds relationship and enables program officers to help. Surprises late in the process are harder to address than anticipated changes discussed in advance. Document thoroughly by maintaining complete records of all modifications. Whether or not changes require approval, document what changed, why, when, and what approvals, if any, were obtained. Complete documentation protects you during audits and demonstrates responsible management. Let us summarize the key points from this lesson on budget revisions and contingency. Budget changes are normal during grant implementation, but modifications must follow regulatory requirements. Understanding the framework in 2 CFR 200.308 ensures you manage changes compliantly. Budgets are living documents that evolve with projects within proper constraints. Some changes require prior approval from your federal sponsor before implementation. Scope changes, key personnel modifications, transfers exceeding thresholds, and other specified actions need agency permission. Knowing what requires approval and requesting it properly prevents compliance violations. Many changes can be made within your management discretion without prior approval. Minor rebudgeting, staff replacements for non-key personnel, vendor changes, and implementation detail adjustments are generally within your authority. This flexibility enables responsive management while maintaining accountability. In our final lesson of Week 9, we explore how AI tools can assist with budget justification drafting. While AI cannot replace your judgment about what resources your project needs, it can help you articulate those needs more effectively. We will examine appropriate uses and important limitations of AI in budget development. Practice exercise. Review the prior approval requirements in 2 CFR 200.308. Identify 3 types of changes that would require prior approval for a typical grant. Then identify 3 changes you could make without prior approval.